Let me ask you something curious to begin with. Did you know that one Roman emperor tried to make his horse a senator? Not a metaphor. A real horse, with a marble stable, purple robes, and a golden food bowl. Now imagine an empire stretching across continents, with legions ready to march, palaces brimming with gold, and at the center of it all sits an emperor, in a perfumed bath, being spoon-fed grapes, completely uninterested in ruling. Tonight, we're going to let the history book stay closed and instead drift into the soft, candlelit world of Rome's most indulgent emperors. The ones who ruled from a chaise lounge, governed from a garden party, or simply left everything to their advisors while they composed poetry. This is not a tale of epic wars or grand politics. This is a sleepy story of decadence, naps, wine, and emperors who made laziness an art form. So get comfortable, let your mind sink into the cushions of imagination, and allow yourself to wander through corridors of excess and absurdity. Let's begin with a man named Nero. Nero the performer in a purple robe. Nero wasn't just a Roman emperor. He fancied himself a star. Not a political one. A literal star. Actor, poet, musician. Imagine your country's leader interrupting meetings to perform in a full musical that he wrote. Nero reigned from AD 54 to 68, and while he started off with some promise, it wasn't long before the spotlight consumed him. He built a massive golden palace, called the Domus Aurea, the Golden House, complete with a rotating ceiling and artificial lake. He performed on stage, sang for hours, and forced the elite of Rome to watch. The catch? They couldn't leave. Some historians say noblemen would fake fainting spells or pretend to die just to escape the performance. Nero also hosted elaborate feasts where the wine flowed endlessly, and guests were sometimes surprised by mechanical ceilings dropping flower petals or perfumes mid-dinner. And as Rome burned in the Great Fire of 64 AD, legend has it, Nero played music, perhaps on a lyre, composing while the city turned to ash. Did he really fiddle while Rome burned? Possibly not. But he certainly wasn't out fighting fires. Instead, Nero designed a new Rome with himself at the center, all roads quite literally leading to his palace. Eventually, his laziness and extravagance caught up with him. As rebellion spread and his allies fled, Nero simply left. Fled the city. He died not with a sword in battle, but quietly, in a villa, whispering, "What an artist dies in me!" Caligula the emperor who married his horse. Before Nero, there was Gaius Julius Caesar Augustus Germanicus. You might know him better as Caligula. His name means little boots, a nickname from his childhood spent in military camps. But there was nothing little about his reign, except, perhaps, his patience for government. Caligula ascended to the throne in AD 37 with great popularity. But within a year, things took a strange turn. He began declaring himself a god. Built temples to himself. Demanded people address him as a living deity. And then, there was Incitatus, his beloved horse. Caligula dressed the animal in robes, gave it a marble stable, and, according to legend, planned to make it a senator. Imagine walking into your parliament, and there's a horse sitting next to the finance minister. He threw lavish feasts where the guests were served gold-dusted food. He built floating palaces on ships and once declared war on the sea itself, instructing soldiers to stab the water and collect seashells as trophies. Caligula was not lazy in the traditional sense. He did things. Just, none of them useful. Eventually, his own guards had had enough. He was assassinated at the age of 28, proving that even in Rome, there were limits to how ridiculous power could become. Elagabalus, the teenage emperor of too much. Fast forward nearly 2 centuries. And we meet Elagabalus. He became emperor at just 14 years old. And what does a teenager do with absolute power? Well, Elagabalus turned the Roman palace into a constant, glittering party. He bathed in rosewater, slept on beds filled with violet petals, hosted feasts that lasted for days, where dishes of peacock tongues and camel heels were served. He once released wild animals into a banquet just to watch the guests react. He surrounded himself with fortune-tellers, magicians, and lovers of all kinds. And then there were his marriages. He married 5 times. One of his wives was a Vestal Virgin, a sacred priestess forbidden from marriage under Roman law. It was a scandal of divine proportions. Elagabalus liked to be called the most beautiful one. He wore women's clothes, wigs, and makeup, not as disguise, but as expression. In his reign, the lines of gender and decorum blurred completely. He reportedly invented a whoopee cushion-like prank using inflated animal bladders under guests' chairs. But the real extravagance? He built a dining room where the ceiling would open mid-meal and dump flower petals. So many, they once suffocated a few unfortunate guests. After just 4 years, Elagabalus was removed, quietly, replaced by a cousin more palatable to the Senate. His name was scrubbed from monuments, but his eccentric legend lives on. Commodus the Gladiator Emperor. Enter Commodus. He ruled from 180 to 192 AD and believed himself to be the reincarnation of Hercules. Not metaphorically. He wore lion skins, carried a club, and posed for statues that way. Commodus adored gladiator games. But he didn't just watch. He participated. Every match was carefully rigged. He fought wounded soldiers, disabled citizens, or animals already restrained. It was theater, for an audience forced to cheer. He charged Rome massive sums for each appearance, and renamed months after himself. The city became Colonia Commodiana. The Senate, renamed the Golden Council of the Emperor. While the empire strained under economic pressure, Commodus retreated further into fantasy. He spent hours bathing in perfumed oils, inspecting his muscles, and designing statues of himself. And like the others, his end came not in battle, but quietly, poisoned, then strangled in his bath. Honorable mentions in imperial laziness. A few other names deserve gentle mentions. Tiberius, who ruled from the cliffs of Capri, far from Rome. He left the business of empire to others while he swam in private grottos. Vitellius, who ate 4 feasts a day and is said to have died with a full belly. And Claudius, who supposedly played dumb so well, no one noticed when he was scheming behind the scenes. Why were they so lazy? You might wonder, how did these men rule, if they barely ruled at all? Well, Rome had layers of administration. Generals, governors, senators. The machine of empire kept churning, even if the man at the top was asleep. In many ways, these emperors lived out fantasies most of us can only imagine. Absolute freedom. Endless luxury. No responsibilities. And nap time, anytime. Their laziness wasn't always about doing nothing. It was about indulgence. About creating a world where work was optional. Where boredom was solved with elephants in the garden or fire-breathing actors at dinner. They remind us, sometimes hilariously, sometimes tragically, what happens when power has no boundaries and no bedtime. And so, as the candles in the marble halls burn low and the sound of distant lyres fades, we leave behind the gold-tipped couches, the perfumed baths, the emperors who governed from beds. The Roman Empire gave us roads, laws, language. But it also gave us cautionary tales wrapped in velvet. Stories of how power without purpose often naps away into absurdity. Sleep well, dear listener. May your dreams be less chaotic than Caligula's dinners, and more peaceful than Tiberius's island.